Hi there, beer fanatics. This is Joel Geyer with the Badger Beer Report. And today we are talking with Scott Krebsbach, who is in the process right now of opening Vault 202 Brewing Company in Appleton, Wisconsin. And if you have been watching our Badger Brewery reports here over the last several months, you have definitely heard us kind of talk about and tease some things with Vault 202 as more and more information came out. But we figured the best way to get more information is to go right to the source. And in this case, it is Scott. And Scott, thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to get to talk to you.
Thanks, Joel. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
So, Scott, let's just start with yourself first. And you have a pretty extensive history working at breweries in different parts of the country, different size breweries, and you've held just about every type of position you can have working within the brewery. So can you talk just a bit kind of about your experiences working at all these different breweries, as well as how you feel that will help shape Vault 202?
Yeah. So I'm from Wisconsin originally, born and raised in Plymouth, Wisconsin. But almost as soon as I graduated from college, I tried to find a brewing job, and that was back in the late 90s, 99. I found my first job actually as sort of a volunteer gig up in Duluth at this now out of business brewery called Lake Superior Brewing Company.
Yep.
So I worked up there for about 6 months until I, ran out of money. But the great thing is being in Minnesota, it was a small group of breweries at the time, maybe 15 or 20 in the entire state. And I got to meet everybody while I was there. So I got my first assistant brewing job at the town hall in Minneapolis. And I was there for about 3 years. The first brewer I worked with, John Haggerty, he ended up leaving after a couple of years, and I think he has his own brewery now down in Ohio somewhere, but he went and worked at New Holland for a little while too and helped them out. I got my first head brewing job at Great Waters Brewing Company in St. Paul. So I was there for a couple of years, loved that place. I was still pretty young. Probably shouldn't have had a head brewing job at the time. But again, the brewing community is so great that I was able to reach out to anybody in Minnesota anytime I had a question, and everybody was willing to help out. And because obviously everybody wants you to make good beer so that the craft brewing industry looks good to all the new people that are trying to get into it at the time. So I eventually hit, we'll say, a little bit of a ceiling there on what I was able to do and what I was able to make professionally. So I started looking for other jobs outside of the Midwest because I never lived outside the Midwest before. And coincidentally, a brewery in upstate New York called Omegang had a shift brewer job available. And at the time, the master brewer there was Randy Thiel, who is now at New Glarus. And he's from Kiel or something like a New Holstein, Wisconsin originally too. So he happened to be home for a Christmas vacation, and I came down from Minnesota, and we just sat at a pub and talked to each other for a little while, and I ended up getting that job. So I moved out to New York, and I was there for about 3 or 4 years. And it was right after Duvel Mortgat had bought them. So the second I showed up, Randy took off his boots and he went up to the office and started working on expansion projects. And as we can see, everybody knows Omegang now, and they're a massive brewery. So when I was there, it was really only two of us, two brewers down on the floor. So we were doing everything from washing kegs to, filtering, transferring beer, and helping out on the bottling line a little bit when we needed to. So it was definitely an all hands on deck kind of process there. So that actually, it led me to the point where I got a little bit burnt out with the industry because it was a lot of work. So I left there in mid 2000s ish, like 2007, and came back to Wisconsin. And I thought, you know what, I need to try something else. So I got into real estate right when the market took a big crash, and it was awful. And I could probably sell, you know, $7 or $8 pints of beer all day long, but trying to walk somebody through their biggest purchase of their life was a little bit more difficult for me. So I'm not much of a salesman, and I figured that out pretty quick. So so after a couple of years, I realized that wasn't going anywhere, and I reached back out to my friends at the Town Hall Brewery in Minnesota, and it turns out they were going through some pretty big expansion projects, and they were looking for more general manager and front of the house people. So I put my hat in the ring, and I ended up moving back up there, and I worked for them for another 7 years. Again, it was mostly doing the GM, front of the house, and sort of a liaison, I guess, between front of the house and brewery, since I still had quite a bit of experience in that realm. And then my wife really wanted to move to Colorado. So she found a job in Colorado, and I followed her there. And it turned out that somebody I knew in Minnesota was friends with a guy who owned a brewery in Colorado. So I didn't miss a day of work. I just left my job in Minnesota and moved to Denver and started up a new job right away at Station 26 Brewing Company. And they're a mid-sized brewery, I guess, in Colorado. They're about 9,000 barrels they produce a year. We made about 3,000 at the brewery, and then contracted another 6,000. So that's again where my career took another little divergence, where I ended up being more of a director of operations there. And I kind of helped out with between the brewery, the taproom, and the distribution company that we owned. And I worked pretty closely with the contract brewery too. So after about 5 years there, this is getting a little long-winded. Sorry about that.
But... No, this is all great. I mean, it's showcasing for the folks here that you've been around the block in terms of just overall experiences from a multitude of different breweries.
Yeah, and it's been great. And I think my only regret is I learned a lot of different things, and I feel like I know a lot about a bunch of stuff, but I wouldn't say I'm an expert in anything. So anyway, moved back to Wisconsin, partially because of family reasons. My in-laws were having some health troubles, and my brother was having a little health troubles, and I just kind of wanted to be closer to home. I found a job up in Door County at Door County and Hacienda Brewery, and that only lasted for about a year. Some things happened there that I might tell other people at some other time, but right now
we know how that goes. We know all about that.
That ended. And I was living in Algoma, Wisconsin at the time, currently still living there. So I knew the people at Anape relatively well. And I just reached out to them to see if they had any extra work for me. And that's when I reached out to an old college roommate of mine and one of his friends who were looking to start a brewery. And so I worked part-time at Anape for about a year while I was kind of getting this brewery project up and going. And that's where we are today. So.
Yeah. So do you feel like you're going to be drawing any inspirations for this throughout like this whole project that you've been on from all these different experiences? Were there things that you felt like that you were taking from different aspects of your, I guess, basically your travels around the country to working in these different breweries?
For sure. I mean, I learned a little bit from every place I worked at, obviously. And, in hindsight, probably should have started a brewery 15 or 20 years ago when it was the big boom. And, but I don't know. I was always a little nervous, or always thought that there was something else I could learn, and something else that could make me more valuable, or make the transition to opening my own place a little bit easier. So now I'm still worried about this. Obviously, it's a big, a big nut to crack and pretty expensive project to take on. But I feel like I have enough background now that things will go smoothly, and I know what I don't know, and I will hire people that will help me out in those facets. And and just be as supportive as I can and build up as many people as I possibly can around me to make a successful place.
Absolutely. Well, so and now starting to look at the project itself, I obviously want to talk about the building and everything, but first things first, how did you end up? Did you pick Appleton and then find a building, or was it vice versa, where you were looking for specific types of building and Appleton was where you found it?
So the business partners that I'm working with are both from the Appleton area, and they really wanted to be there. To be honest with you, I didn't really care where it was going to be. We were still looking probably in the Fox Valley somewhere, but this particular building it's had its challenges during the construction process, but it's just such a good location. And the city of Appleton, just downtown, it's one of the more walkable cities in Wisconsin, actually, for its size. And it's just a great city. So I'm super excited about being there now.
Well, and one thing that we've actually been talking on Badger Beer Report recently is that Appleton has really started to come into its own as a craft beer almost destination at this point, because it wasn't that long ago that there was only a handful of breweries, but now, there's what, five or six, and you guys are coming along, and Ope from down here in the Milwaukee area just announced that they're opening up a location up there, and once you throw in, folks in Nina and up more towards the Green Bay, as you follow some of the other communities up towards the Green Bay, like there's a lot of breweries kind of starting to group up there essentially in Appleton. So how do you feel about the Appleton beer scene as a whole, or in terms of your excitement of being part of it and how you kind of fit in with everyone else?
You're right. It is small. And I think there's enough people that live in that area that we could probably have 5 or 6 more breweries. Yeah. I don't necessarily want them opening up tomorrow, but but the great thing about it is it's a pretty experienced group of breweries up there. Stone Arch has been around forever. Mm-hmm. And Appleton Beer Factory and McFleischmann's and the Lion's Tail guys. So it's a pretty diverse and a pretty experienced group that I hope we fit in really well. Hop Yard's one of the newer kids on the block, but they've even been around for 5 or so years now too. So, and then they're going through just opened up a tap room down in Menominee Falls.
Yeah.
Too, so.
Mm-hmm. Yep. They just have that going on as well. So a lot of moving pieces right now in the Wisconsin craft beer scene, including you guys. Yeah. We think that's a really cool fit, though, to have found this kind of location there in Appleton. And so you said that you kind of, with this building, that it was just like a really cool building. Were you guys, though, looking specifically to repurpose a building essentially, or were you just kind of like wherever we can find that will fit essentially a brewery's needs the best, that we feel is a good fit for our business?
I feel like we wanted to pick the building and the location first, and then sort of decide, I guess, how we'd squeeze everything in there. We looked at a couple other locations, but I don't know, this one just sort of, it struck us that it would work really well here. So it's, like I said, it's right downtown, so it adds a little bit more challenges for production. It'd be nicer just to have a warehouse space just outside of town. You can do whatever you want, and it makes the construction a little bit easier. But just, I don't know, the character of the building and the location, just, we're willing to work through some of the challenges, I guess. So I'd say we only looked at maybe 5 or 6 different places, and this one just stood out for us.
Speaking of those challenges, have there been any things that have kind of popped up that have, surprised you as you were trying to renovate this former bank? Like, what has that whole process been like for you guys?
Yeah, the bank building, it looked like it was super sturdy, and it, for the most part, it is. But when you bring in a couple of tanks and you fill them full of beer, and now they're a couple of 1,000 pounds each, and you put them on this concrete floor that has a basement underneath it, you realize, I have to spend tens of thousands of dollars shoring up the floor to make sure my tanks don't fall through it. So it's not little expenses, but things like that you were hoping, a 2-foot thick concrete floor should be able to handle all this, but now you got to shore it up a little bit. And so it's little challenges like that, kind of working through the workflow of where we're going to get grain in. When you're right downtown, you don't want to park a semi in the middle of the street and try to unload things, but we may have to do that. That's just the way it's going to be. There's only limited space for putting spent grain. Got to get a hold of a farmer and make sure they pick it up quick, because nobody likes that aroma floating around. So it's there's thousands of things that we've thought of, and probably a couple hundred that I forgot, but I'll figure them out pretty quick, I'm sure.
Yeah. So talking about this space, I know you probably don't want to, necessarily give every single little detail, but we're just really curious, like what is this physical taproom space going to be like at Vault 202?
So it's kind of a long, narrow space, and then it sort of flares out on the back end. So along College, you walk in the front door of the bar, and the draft cooler will be right there. A little bit of a wraparound bar kind of, and then a large, long area for seating. We'll have a little bit of a lounge area, some booze off to the side. And then as you go a little bit farther north, it kind of flares out for a little bit of a private party space or overflow dining. And then the brewery will be in the back along the north windows. So it's actually a pretty big brewery space. Being on the north side, hopefully it won't be super hot during the summer when the sun's shining through there. But so it's tall ceilings, I think they're about 20 feet high. Everything will be exposed. So, it almost has that combination of something slightly classy, but a little bit of a warehouse look to it. The floors are old terrazzo floors at the banquet in there. And then I think there was some graphics that came up on social media too. There's these cool tiles along the wall.
Yes, I was going to ask about that. Yeah.
So everything is kind of like a 60s or 50s sort of retro feel to it. So we'll try to keep a little bit of that and add a little bit more rustic wood, darker colors to make it feel a little bit more comfortable. But
because I know it's like the stairways and everything, I kind of assumed that there was a decent portion of the bank that you were going to be able to integrate into the tap room, so that, because one thing I do, when I've traveled, all over the country to visit all these breweries, I love when a brewery is repurposing a building that has like a history to it, and when it's repurposing the history in a way that is very evident what that history is, in a way that it almost just is breathing new life into this. Because these buildings, obviously, whether it's a bank or a church or a school or a hardware, whatever it was, they were part of this community, and the brewery is essentially allowing it to live a second life almost for the community to come in and enjoy it in another way. So I think that seemed like at least what you were doing to a certain extent, that you're keeping touches and stuff of what the bank was when it was in its heyday.
When we looked at the space originally, it was definitely gutted and cleaned out pretty well. So really the floor and that decorative sort of wall on the west side is about the only features upstairs that still feel like a bank.
Yeah.
But you take that long winding stairwell downstairs, and there's a little bit of a landing area, and then obviously the huge bank vault door. And then eventually we'll use the vault space for sort of a lounge or private dining area too. So
that's really, really neat. Speaking of, so the name Vault 202, obvious. I mean, vault is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Is 202 like the number on the vault, or what does the 202 signify?
So it's the building itself is 200 College Avenue or 200 West College Avenue. So we're literally just, splitting the space up. So we're getting a new address. It'll be 202 West College Avenue.
Okay.
So I was the name obviously is a little on the nose. That's,
I like it.
We could have done something a little bit more unique or creative, I guess, with it. And I was a little nervous at first, but I had worked for Station 26 Brewing Company, and there's a Station 1 Brewing Company here in Swamico, and so we added the 202 just to kind of differentiate a little bit, because the word vault is, I guess, used quite a bit and around the country, or even I think there's a new supper club that just opened up north of Appleton that's called the Vault now too. So it's
Okay. Well, I personally love the name because again, I'm a guy that enjoys, like I said, the repurposing of everything in Vault. Like it speaks to the space, and people are going to know almost ahead of time. Like it's not just called, if it was just called, I know what they had, there's an Appleton beer factory, but if you're just Appleton Brewing Company,
yeah,
people aren't going to realize, until they maybe get there, they're like, oh, like, this is an old bank. Vault
true.
202, folks are searching it. It's like between your logo and the name, they're going to be able to figure out pretty quickly, which I think is really neat.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really excited about this space. So besides like the physical space, what kind of experiences can people kind of expect to have when they are visiting Vault 202?
Well, we're going to be a full service bar and restaurant too. So we'll have wine there. We'll have some specialty cocktails. Obviously being a brewer, I'm a little bit of a snob when it comes to the beer part. So I don't want to overdo it on the other things, but I want them available. So if you're downtown, you got a group of 10 people and only 9 of them like beer, you can still stop by and check the place out. We'll start out with a pretty limited menu too. We're going to have a pizza oven, and so we'll do pizzas and salads and probably some chicken wings. And then, depending on how crazy we are or how good we get at the cooking part of it, we'll expand the menu a little bit. We'll be open during the day too. It's right downtown, so we're hoping for a good lunch traffic down there. The weekends in Appleton are crazy too. The farmers market throughout the whole summer is nuts. So we'll try to be open early on Saturdays, maybe have a breakfast pizza option available for people. And so it should be fun. There's a couple of different event spaces, like I talked about in the back. It's more overflow dining, but also an event space. There'll be a large garage door on the brewery interior. So we could open up that garage door, and if you wanted to even rent out the brewery space itself, you could sort of have overflow into that area. Won't let you in there flipping valves or anything like that.
Yeah. That's probably a smart idea, especially after folks have a couple beers in their system.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think we want to be similar to every other pub down there. It's just a great community spot for people to get together and relax and enjoy the space and enjoy the friends and family. So
now that we've kind of talked about the space, I don't know how much you guys have been able to discuss beer and like how far along you are with that planning and how much you're willing to share. But I just didn't know if you had any tidbits of information that you maybe had thought of with Vault 202, whether it's, if you're going to do flagships, what kind of styles you're looking at having, any kind of information like that.
I definitely have been around enough that I know what beers that I like and what I don't, but I also know that I like to be able to pay the bills too. So I feel like we're going to make a little bit of everything, but we'll listen to the community. And if they like an alt beer, we're going to make an alt beer, and maybe it's going to end up being one of our flagship beers. I love Kolsch's. I love lagers just in general.
That's me. Yeah.
So ideally, I would like to get to the point where we can do a lot of lagers, but I know in the beginning we're gonna have to pump out a lot of ales just to keep up. I'm hoping at least.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think we'll start out with a lighter beer, a Kolsch, probably pale ale, IPA, a porter, and then some kind of an amber beer, whether it's a Vienna lager, an alt, or something like that. And then we'll go. I got a background in Belgian beers. I like wit beers a lot. I don't know how I have to learn a little bit about Appleton too, because I'm not from there originally. So I'm relying on the customer base to kind of help me out, tell me what they like, because we can make anything. And I like making a majority of different beers too. So
yeah, well, I mean, and so are you planning on initially just kind of, I don't know, feeling your way is the right phrase, but not necessarily going in with a dead set, these are our flagships, and then we'll rotate after that? Are you going to kind of like test, have a couple beers that you're thinking maybe would be flagships, and then but you're going to be kind of malleable with how it actually sorts out in the end?
I think what we'll do is we'll have styles that we think we want to have as flagships, but those beers like that pale ale might be a flagship beer, but if it turns out that the customers don't like this particular hop or don't like that combination, then we will try something else and we'll see which one sticks, which one I like the most, I suppose, too, and we'll go from there. So I am a bit of a traditionalist, so I would like to have, say, 4 to 5 flagships, and then so we'll have 12 taps. So we'll have plenty of rotating, variety to keep it interesting on a weekly or monthly basis. But the goal is to make beers that we like and that we're proud of and that we want to show off to people. So
yeah, absolutely. So I know that we're not going to dive too far into different types of personnel and everything, but when it does come to like whoever is doing all of the brewing, is there an overall brewing philosophy that you do kind of want to stick with? Because I know you kind of talked about that a little bit already with your approach with certain styles and overall, like with lagers, but is there something overall that you're hoping to bring to the table with just the overall brewing?
Not really. Like, I guess I don't have some dyed in the wool brewing philosophy. Like I like to experiment a little bit, but I don't really, I'm not a huge sour fan necessarily. And I also get a little bit nervous about doing sours in a clean facility. But if we can figure out a way between me and the brew staff, figure out a way to do it and do it where I feel comfortable with it, we might sneak a sour in there every once in a while. I had a lot of experience with barrel-aged beers when I worked at the town hall in Minneapolis. If people have never been there before, it's the most award-winning brewery in Minnesota, and they've been winning barrel-aged beer medals since 2001. So they are a great place to stop by and check out. So have to get together with some of the local distillers or, find some barrels around the area to see what's interesting. I'd love to put some barrel-aged beers together. But again, those aren't, huge sellers. So it's, you got to have the space to dedicate to it. So that's another little slightly challenging thing about the building is, we don't have a lot of extra storage space for
what you see is what you're going to get for the most part when you're visiting. There's not some hidden back room like you're at a big box store.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we'll sneak some of those barrels out into the actual customer area so you can.
Yeah, it's like you go to certain tap rooms and they have like old like barrels as tables, and people just won't know that there's actual beer in the tables that they're drinking on. Until you're wheeling one away while they're holding their glass because it's time to tap it. But yeah, so one thing I wanted to loop back on that you said really early on was that you were talking about. If I was, whatever, I should have opened up this brewery 15 years ago, during the brewery boom. Has like the current kind of economic climate or any of the trends in the craft brewing industry kind of impacted your approach to both the current build and the plans that you have once you are open?
A little bit, but I feel like I've obviously been in this long enough and I've seen a couple ups and downs. Like even before I got in like 97-ish, there was a big downturn in breweries, and there were a couple along in the 2000s. But I think if you just make good quality beer, that's always been sort of my mantra is first make good beer, and then you can figure out the rest after that. I feel like beer is one of those affordable luxuries. Like, all right, maybe you're not going to buy that $400,000 house or get a new car, but you can always go out and have a $7 pint with your buddies, whether you're happy or sad. So it's an affordable luxury, and the goal is just to make a space that people feel comfortable and want to come into.
Yeah, well, and speaking on that, I know we kind of have talked about like what you're planning on for the experience and the beer and just kind of one of the things that I always talk about when people ask me about, things I'm looking for when I'm visiting a brewery and when, I was writing my book and everything is one thing that I always say is what makes a brewery unique and stand out? What makes it, memorable? Because, in Appleton, that there's a handful of breweries, but as someone that has worked in, for instance, the Twin Cities, and you've worked in Denver where there's enough breweries, you throw a rock and you can hit one in certain parts of Denver right now.
Yeah.
Where it is kind of important to differentiate yourself, from all these other breweries. So in your eyes though, what is going to make Vault 202 a unique and memorable place for people to come and visit?
I think like we're going to, I don't know, go out of our way to try not to step on the toes of other breweries in the area. So, we'll make different styles that maybe they're not focusing on, or, I don't know. I really don't know. Sometimes you have this grand vision after 20 years in the business of what you want your place to look like. And you just kind of, you cross your fingers and hope people like the same stuff you do.
Yeah.
I just want it to be a fun community space. Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, I mean, just for my own thing, we could probably clip together some of the things that you've already been talking about, because the fact that you've really done a really good job, like repurposing this old bank, and that you're willing to, hopefully be able to showcase and focus on some of these styles that maybe are not as prevalent. As you said, as long as people are willing to drink them. I know I would be, especially if you're lager focused. I mean, let me tell you, I'm going to have to come up and visit you once you're open just for that, just to try whatever lager that you have on. But yeah, I mean, this is just, the whole project just is so interesting to us. And the fact that you have this history, it really gives us as fanatics like something to really look forward to, I feel like, because I mean, because what you talk about the big brewery boom, well, 15 years ago, a lot of the breweries that were opening up were not necessarily by people that had the type of experience that you had. And so you had a lot of breweries that were making mediocre beer, had a mediocre tap room, and that were just, were surviving because it thing was to have breweries opening up and people were excited about it. And now I do think it takes someone that has a lot of experience and knows what they're doing in all aspects of it, because it's not just as you've talked about in your experiences, it's not just about being able to make good beer. I mean, that obviously is the number one priority, but at the end of the day, there's a lot more to it than just that.
True. The most successful breweries that I've worked for, the owner of the place actually had like more of a finance or business management degree. And they knew what they didn't know also. They don't know how to make beer. They didn't know how to run a kitchen. So you hire people and you put them in those positions and you help them be successful. And, there's tight margins in the restaurant and the brewery business. And with things going up all over the place, aluminum, and who knows what the heck's going to happen over the next, 2 to 4 years. But it's managing the money to make sure that you're not getting over your skis too. So you can make some great beer, but if you make some critical financial mistakes, you're done with pretty quickly too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've seen that not just here in Wisconsin, but all over here, especially in the last year, which is why, I mean, it's been kind of surprising that there has been a lot of positive momentum in terms of openings and breweries opening up additional locations here in the last few months around the state, which is, from the media perspective and a beer lover's perspective, is very awesome to see, obviously. And it hopefully points to the fact that it is not all doom and gloom, because that was kind of the theme of the second half of 2024 from a lot of folks in craft beer, was a pretty doom and gloom outlook, because I mean, that's the way things seem to be trending. But early here in 2025, things to be, I don't know if the ship is righted necessarily, but there is more positive news than what we may have anticipated at this juncture. So that is all great. But yeah, Scott, do you have anything else that you would like to add in terms of this entire experience of opening up this brewery, in terms of being in Appleton, just the bank, whatever else you would like to touch on?
I'm really excited about, like I said, I've never opened a brewery on my own, and this is really going to be my first like big Wisconsin brewing experience. I
Yeah.
spent most of my career outside the state, so I'm really excited about meeting the rest of the community in the state. And I've always had a good relationship and good connection with every other state brewers guild that I've ever been involved in, and obviously Wisconsin has a really rich history. So I'm just excited to be part of the community, and I'm gonna go around and introduce myself as much as I can, and get some collaborations going with people.
Yeah, heck yeah, that is for sure. And I can promise you, once you're open, you'll have to let us know. I don't want to speak for the entire Badger Beer Report team, but I certainly will be making sure that I can get up there and get to visit you guys. I know that, I was just literally just messaging with Greg, and he is super pumped. We were talking about you guys last night on our live stream. I think we were kind of discussing about how excited we were for it, and teasing this interview. So we are thrilled for you. We wish you and the rest of your team there at Vault 202 the absolute best. And yeah, just keep us in the loop. We will be continuing to share any updates that you share with us and with the public. And when it's time to open the doors, we will. I don't know. I'm an hour and a half away. I can't promise I'm going to be there for opening day. I've got two young kids, a family. So, I can't just move mountains necessarily, but I will do whatever I can to get up there shortly after you kind of it's better for me to wait anyway till you get your feet kind of, stabilized anyway. I know that opening a brewery is going to be an absolute whirlwind for, I don't even know how long.
Yeah, it'll be exciting. The goal is to be open by late summer. We're really hoping we can be open before August. We got a pretty aggressive construction schedule, but you know what happens with construction. So.
As someone that has been reporting on and following a lot of brewery builds over the last couple of years, yes, I know exactly how it goes with construction timelines especially with breweries, because all of a sudden it's like you find one thing and it's like in your rent, especially with the old buildings too. Yeah. So kudos to you for taking that all on. But yeah, we will look forward to hearing a lot more from you, Scott, and being able to follow Vault 202's journey as you guys open up there in the Appleton area.
Cool. I appreciate you taking the time, Joel. This has been great.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott. Cheers.
See ya.